Well, it's a privilege to be with you and to know Adam and what he has started. And, I've spent 16 years in American politics, but I don't think anything that we've accomplished comes close to what we're seeing happen here in your own state with OpenTheBooks.com. Republics require four things to survive. They require faith and trust in the rule of law. They require economic freedom. We're now 17th in the world after 200 years of being number one. Economic freedom is defined as the ability to start and grow a business. Number three is limited government. We have anything but that, both at the federal level and often in states like Oklahoma, it's not limited. And then finally, a virtuous and moral people. And the combination of those four things are what our founders realized that we had to have, and their vision on what they wrote, both in terms of our Declaration of Independence, but also in our Constitution, and the struggles that gave us that Constitution, depended on leadership, visionary leadership, much like Miss Lillian Rosen, and much like we see your speaker today. It's an honor for me to be here at City Club. I believe our kids are worth saving. Our country's worth saving for them. I travel more than I ever did when I was U.S. Senator or Congressman because we have to wake up, and we're the ones that are going to fix that. And Adam Andrzejewski is creating a way known across the country today where we can actually have sunshine and hold those in elected public office accountable. Adam is the founder and CEO of OpenTheBooks. It's the world's largest private database of government information. He's an entrepreneur, and before founding OpenTheBooks, he co-founded Homepages Directories, a $20 million publishing company from 1997 to 2007. Most recently, he's appeared at Harvard Law School, Georgetown Law School, Columbia School of Journalism, and many others. He's had an interview with Brian Lamb. If you've seen it, it's excellent, on C-SPAN, on what sunshine and what our founders thought was important, an accounting of the books and transparency for us as citizens. He ran for governor of Illinois in 2010. He's a graduate of Northern Illinois University. He's run the Chicago Marathon 6 times. Most important, he's married to Carrie and has 3 lovely young daughters. He's my hero because he's doing something for the future that many of us haven't done. And he's investing his life in it, his time, and his pursuit so that the future for our children can be just as good as it's been for us. Will you welcome, please, Adam Andrzejewski.
Well, this is an amazing day. Senator Tom Coburn, thank you. Thank you for your bold leadership, your courage. Thank you for being our honorary chairman at OpenTheBooks.com. We appreciate you. Senator Coburn has the work ethic that inspires this entire movement. Today, he was on a plane at 6 o'clock in the morning. He woke up at 4:30 in the morning. He did 3 events here. He's now flying out of here. He doesn't even get to eat lunch with us here today. He's got another event tonight. He speaks at 6 o'clock down in Montgomery, Alabama. Dr. Tom Coburn, thank you for your leadership. City Club Board of Governors, President Jay Doherty, Chris Roebling, Treasurer, Lillian Roser, and the membership of City Club, thank you for hosting us. Thank you for extending the offer to us to share our mission and vision. I just want to take a moment to recognize some very special people to me here in the room today. I would not have dedicated my life to public service but for the example in my small town of my parents, John and Janet Andrzejewski. In 1976 and 1978, when I was 7 years old and 9 years old, my father stood up to run for office for state representative against a very powerful Illinois politician. My father ran for state representative against George Ryan, and he lost that race. But it instilled in me the value and nobility of true public service. Please welcome my parents, John and Janet Andrzejewski. And I just want to say a few words about my wife, Carrie. Nobody loves her family more or has a bigger heart for her family or has sacrificed more for our cause than my wife, Carrie. Please welcome her. And if you've been around since 2010, you remember my daughters. They were babies and toddlers at the time. And now we have a teenager. Ellie is 13 and a really good kid, and Molly is 11, and Emma Kate is 9. They're 2 ballerinas and a pianist. Girls, your mom and I, we are proud of you. The problems of Illinois are well chronicled, and yet I think it comes down to a single question. And it's a historic question from Chicago, from the 43rd Ward Alderman. Are the people of Illinois ready for reform? And in this room, with 12 table sponsors, a sold-out room of 300 people, the question's been asked, you've answered it. I appreciate you. You and I, we are ready for reform. And as you know, a fish rots from the head down. And Illinois is the Super Bowl of corruption. In fact, our number one manufactured product in Illinois is corruption. The exploits of our governors are well known around the world. 4 out of the last 9 of our governors have served time in prison. Two of our governors, we did a little bit of research in 2013, Republican George Ryan and Democrat Rod Blagojevich were actually serving jail time at the same time. But what we found in our oversight piece from last week, published at Forbes, and it trended number 1 at Forbes, if the governors don't go to jail, the citizens of Illinois and the taxpayers pay a heavy price on their lifetime pension payouts. Take, for example, Governor Jim Edgar, Republican governor, who retired after 20 years of public service and took a General Assembly pension for $163,000 today. And then he served 20 years at the University of Illinois as a professor, and he's taken an $83,000 a year pension there. But it's not even enough. He's been hired back part-time by the U of I on a salary of $63,000, and all told, this year, Governor Jim Edgar will take $311,000 from taxpayers. But it's beyond our governors. It's also, we have big cities, and we're in one, Chicago, with Mayor Rahm Emanuel. And here in the city, Emanuel ran for mayor in 2011 on 2 promises. If you remember, Mayor Rahm Emanuel promised to clean up the historic culture of corruption in City Hall. Rahm Emanuel, he promised to end pay-to-play, where you give campaign cash and you expect a city contract. And in 2015, I remember sitting at my desk in the office when I got a call from New York City, from Fox News on the John Stossel program, the Emmy Award-winning journalist. And he said, Adam, Rahm Emanuel's running for re-election. Can you fact-check his campaign promises? And I said, yes, we can. And 4 days later, after we mashed 12 years of the city of Chicago checkbook up with Rahm Emanuel's campaign donor disclosures, this is what we found. 600 city vendors gave Rahm Emanuel $7 million of campaign cash, and those vendors had reaped $2 billion in city payments. And it showed us 2 things. One, that Emanuel was firmly in control of the Mayor Daley political machine. And the second thing it showed us was that pay-to-play in the city of Chicago was still entirely legal. You are here, if you think about it, because you want an answer to the following question. How do you fight City Hall, and how do you win? And it's a question that's been around since our nation's founding. When Ben Franklin left the Constitutional Convention, a citizen asked him, "What do we have here?" And Franklin said, "We have a republic if you can keep it." The answers to our problems in Illinois are not going to come from our political class. They are going to come from we the people. And this is why I am hopeful and optimistic about our future, both in Illinois and across the country. Because in America, the citizen is sovereign. Our rights are enshrined in our founding documents. Our founders knew that knowledge was power. Our founders knew the power of transparency, and they wrote it into our founding documents. In the United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 9, it states that a regular statement and account of the receipts and expenditures of all public money shall be published from time to time. And today it's the internet age. There's a clear interpretation. Post every dime online in real time. Open the books. My name is Adam Andrzejewski, and I founded OpenTheBooks.com on the clear vision to capture every dime taxed and spent at every level of government across the entire country, create a database that's easy for people, watchdogs, journalists, think tanks, media to access that data and hold the political class accountable for their tax and spend decisions. And we've had a lot of success capturing data. We've built the world's largest private database of government spending. And here's what it's comprised of. At the local level, in 60,000 municipalities across the country, we've captured 16 million public employees' salary and pension records. In the 50 states, we have 48 of those states with their checkbook spending, most going back a decade. At the federal level, we are the only one-stop shop for all disclosed federal spending. That's federal checkbook, like contracts and grants and loans, insurance payments, direct payments, and farm subsidies. And we also display federal public employees' salaries and pension benefits. But not only do we open the books, we audit the books. For the first time in history, we are harnessing three powerful forces. It's the power of the Freedom of Information Act. It's the power of the latest in technology to slice, dice, and display government spending, and it is the power of forensic auditing techniques to root out waste, fraud, corruption, and taxpayer abuse. We are following the model of our honorary chairman, the legendary Senator Dr. Tom Coburn. And here's the Coburn model. Waste and corruption is bipartisan. Coburn reached across the aisle in 2006. He worked with then Illinois Senator Barack Obama. They sponsored the legislation that opened the federal checkbook to sunshine for the first time in history. And then Coburn used the Senate rules, and he stopped thousands of pork barrel expenditure projects from his colleagues in the United States Senate by using the Senate rules. So many he stopped, his colleagues started calling him Dr. No. What Coburn couldn't stop, he chronicled and published in his waste book report to embarrass his colleagues. But it also took courage. You see, in 2004, as a freshman in the well of the Senate, Coburn stood armed with an amendment to stop an earmark, a $300 million earmark from mainland Alaska to an island off the coast that served 100 people. It was a bridge, and he knew he was going to lose the vote that night. He knew he was going to be retaliated against, and he was. The Republicans in the Senate stripped his ability to practice medicine while in the United States Senate, but he knew that when the American people found out where their tax dollars were going to be spent. He knew he would stop that bridge, and he eventually stopped that bridge and used that example, that bridge to nowhere, to stop earmarks as we know it. We believe that transparency and open government is revolutionizing United States public policy and politics. From our own experience, transparency works in red states like Wyoming. For the past 3 years, the state auditor in Wyoming, Cynthia Cloud, has rejected our Freedom of Information Act request for the state checkbook. She's won 2 terms in Wyoming with 99% of the vote. She's only lost 1% of the vote, being elected twice as a Republican in Wyoming. She's not running this year. You see, if you're not suing, you're not serious. And we got serious about breaking open the Wyoming checkbook spending record. We issued a demand letter after we found that a couple of years ago she spent $63 million on a fancy piece of third-party financial software. She could definitely produce the checkbook. She wasn't telling the truth when she said that it would take her office years and years to produce a responsive record. When she got 3 primary candidates all running on transparency, I am proud to say that in a couple of weeks, the books in Wyoming will be open and we will have forced open the Wyoming state checkbook. Cynthia Cloud decided not to run for re-election anymore. Transparency works in blue states. Even in states like Oregon. In Oregon, in the lead up to the 2016 election, we received a tip that one of the most powerful politicians in the state, the chief regulator, the head of the Bureau of Labor and Industry, Brad Avakian, and you know Brad Avakian. He's the regulator that regulated the wedding cake bakers into bankruptcy. And the tip said, and we fact-checked it, that he was using his state agency resources on his campaign. And we built out a troubling pattern of using state employees on the campaign, and we published it at Forbes, and immediately the state's largest newspaper, the Oregonian, reached out to his campaign, and they said, yes, it's true. We use state employees on the campaign, on state time, but they make up the time later. And that's illegal, even in Oregon. And Brad Avakian's the first Democrat to lose statewide since 2002. We believe that transparency will revolutionize United States public policy and politics. It even works at the largest federal agencies, the federal agencies that typically are immune from any reform. And you remember the scandal in 2014 at the Department of Veterans Affairs. At the very nexus of the scandal, a sick veteran couldn't get in to see a doctor because there weren't enough doctors, and the VA claimed a lack of budget. Well, when we forensic audited the VA checkbook spending, here's what we found. We found they spent $20 million on a high-end luxury art portfolio. It was 21-foot Christmas trees for $27,000. It was sculptures priced like 5-bedroom homes. In California, at a VA medical facility that serves blind veterans, the facility spent $700,000 on 2 fancy sculptures. And blind veterans can't see a fancy sculpture, and every veteran deserves to simply be able to see a doctor. We pushed our findings to Good Morning America and ABC News. They were picked up by powerful Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley, who wrote a 3-page letter to the then VA Secretary Robert McDonald. And within 34 days of Good Morning America publishing that material, the VA Secretary apologized and instituted new rules to stop the practice on a go-forward basis. And that's the power of transparency. At OpenTheBooks.com, we don't do this alone. We have a lot of friends, and our best friends are regular people, people who do extraordinary things. I am proud that we're joined here in the room today by Beverly Pearlson. Beverly Pearlson is the founder of the Band of Mothers. Here's their slogan: warriors come from warriors. Her son is a recipient of the Bronze Star, and Beverly is a warrior. And she had our backs. She and her organization started a letter writing campaign that was very effective with the VA secretary. She even ginned up her grandchildren, and she sent their art to post for free within the VA medical facilities. And the VA secretary responded on the record to her letters. Our victory is your victory, Beverly. Thanks for having our back. I am proud that our data, it's free for everyone to use at OpenTheBooks.com. We're a public charity. Anyone can use it to hold the political class accountable. And I am so pleased that independent third-party watchdog organizations are using our data with great success. There are 2 retired military veterans from Southern Illinois. Their names are Kirk Allen and John Kraft, and they're the founder of the Edgar County Watchdogs, and I want to read you what the Chicago Tribune wrote about them on the front page of the paper not long ago. They are the muckrakers of the farm fields, the bloodhounds for small-town waste and corruption, the self-appointed guardians of taxpayer money who comb through the books of municipal governments all across Illinois in search of misconduct and misspending. Here's their model, and I believe it's the most substantial and robust watchdog model in the country. You start with open data. When you do, you will have questions. You need to ask your elected official to answer your questions, and oftentimes getting an answer from the public official will necessitate having to network up to 50 of your friends and family into those public meetings. That creates a media event, and that's the model that has forced out waste, fraud, corruption, and abuse in Illinois. It has led to law enforcement officials filing on 167 indictment counts. There's already been 21 convictions on those counts, and here's the important number. 306 elected and public officials have fled their positions in Illinois in the face of their fierce transparency. Let's welcome John Kraft and Kirk Allen. It takes courage. They are real heroes. We knew that transparency was powerful, and we believe it will revolutionize United States public policy. When we first got started in 2011, just right here in Illinois, we got started by publishing for the first time ever the pay and pensions from virtually every single level of government in the state. And very quickly, we found and issued our first Big Dogs report. Leading the Big Dogs report was the treasurer of Lyons Township. His salary in 1 year went from $164,000 to $296,000. The citizens in his district knew that wasn't right, but they lived in Cook County, and typically in Cook County, the prosecutor cannot find public corruption anywhere. The Better Government Association got involved. They made a lot of noise, and I am proud to say that eventually that treasurer was indicted for stealing up to $1.5 million over a 20-year period. He pled guilty to a 9-year sentence in jail. In 2014, I kicked off an oversight investigation of my local junior college, the College of DuPage. I knew that then incumbent Governor Pat Quinn was coming to campus to deliver a commencement address. So I filed a Freedom of Information Act request for the emails of College President Robert Bruder. Within the 3,000 pages of production, we unearthed an email strategy from the president to the board of trustees to try to bring political support to the then incumbent Pat Quinn in exchange for a $20 million state construction grant. When we unearthed that email, we stopped that grant. We found that the College of DuPage, over a 6-year period, spent about $600 million rebuilding every building on campus. But they built more office space for the executives than classroom space for the students. They built an upscale French restaurant complete with a world-class wine cellar and hired a French sommelier. And it wasn't enough. Our team found that in a 3-year period, they spent about $100,000 in that restaurant, billing off for the college administrators in terms of parties and champagne and wine and filet mignon. $100,000, and the Chicago Tribune picked up that story, and they added another $2,000 as they dug deeper into other years. But our teams didn't stop. The college claimed they were transparent with every dime. And we fact-checked that promise, and we found in a 6-year period that they hid $100 million from taxpayers, the media, from the Board of Trustees itself. Only the president, the chairman of the board, and the accounting staff knew the details on those expenditures. And what could be in $100 million? The president's shooting club dues. Wine, $250,000 of wine purchased as instructional supplies. When the president went to Botswana, Africa, to shoot an African elephant, he billed off his global satellite phones. And then our teams of auditors found that the chief radio station engineer traded to the tune of over $400,000 with himself. And we pushed this to the Chicago Tribune, and they dug a deeper investigation. They published 2 front-page news articles, and then the state's attorney, Bob Berlin, indicted that radio engineer for stealing $443,000. And he pled guilty last October to an 8-year sentence in jail and paying back the taxpayer a restitution payment of $400,000. Our organization can't claim credit for all of that. It's all the stakeholders at the College of DuPage. It's the Edgar County watchdogs that independently ran their own investigations and then came up with legislation that oftentimes State Representative Jeannie Ives sponsored. They drove it through the General Assembly, 6 pieces of legislation through the Democrat General Assembly signed by the Republican governor. It is the Daily Herald and the Chicago Tribune that put tons of front-page ink on that story. It is organizations, grassroots organizations like the West Suburban Patriots and Carol Davis that put hundreds of volunteers in those meetings. It's the teachers union that took a no-confidence vote on Robert Bruder as president of the school. And it is the leader of the movement that emerged on the board, the fearless Kathy Hamilton, and she also joins us here today. We have a lot of work to do at all levels, and we cannot complain about Washington, D.C. or our own state governments if we don't have good government where we live. And it takes personal sacrifice. And I think the supporters of Bernie Sanders and the supporters of Donald Trump from 2016, they fundamentally are starting to realize how difficult it is going to be to bring real reform. Both camps claimed that the system was gamed. It's our job at Open the Books to show them exactly how bad it is. And so what we do at the federal level on a quarterly basis is we come out with oversight reports on a tranche of federal data. And here's the latest report that we published at the start of this year. It's called Mapping the Swamp. We literally mapped the 2 million civil service federal employees by their employer zip code across the entire country. So it's not just the swamp in Washington, D.C. There's federal employees now employed in 30,000 zip codes across the country. And it's expensive. It's $1.1 million a minute. It's $500 million a day. And it's getting more expensive. If you're a highly compensated federal bureaucrat earning over $200,000 per year, the headcount of those folks in the last 6 years increased by 167%. we found 30,000 highly compensated federal bureaucrats out-earned every governor of the 50 states, and that threshold salary is $180,000 a year. The average pay in 78 large agencies now exceeds six figures, $100,000. It is the new minimum wage for a federal bureaucrat. And it's not only about salaries. This is a compensation package, so they get bonuses. 122,000 six-figure salaried employees also got a bonus. The bonus bucket last year cost the American taxpayer $1.5 billion, yet they disclosed only 1/3 of that. $1.1 billion, 1 million performance bonuses were not disclosed to us. They are shielded by contracts with the federal unions. And how can 1 million federal bureaucrats get a performance bonus? Well, we found a GAO audit from 2015. Incredibly, 99.6% of federal workers are rated highly successful. And that is impossible. The advertised purity of Ivory soap is only 99.6%. We even found small agencies gaming the system for personal gain. The #1 bonus last year out of 2 million federal bureaucrats came out of the Presidio Trust in San Francisco, California. They are not curing cancer. They're not sending a man or woman to the moon. They're a land management agency on a former military base at the base of the Golden Gate Bridge. The human resource manager last year took a bonus of $141,000. Their realtor got $82,000. Their program manager got $78,000. In the past 3 years, 6 out of 10 highest bonuses in the entire federal system came out of the Presidio Trust. Join me on the clarion call. I think Congress should investigate this. How can the Presidio Trust game the system for personal gain? It's a compensation package. It's not only about salaries and bonuses, but it's also about benefits. If you hit your 3-year anniversary as a federal bureaucrat, you stand in line to get 43 days of paid time off. That's 10 holidays, 13 sick days, and 20 vacation days. That's 8.5 weeks of paid time off. Let's take a poll of the room. Who here in the room today gets 43 days of paid time off? Nobody. This isn't France. That benefit cost the American taxpayer last year $22 billion. So I've got a great idea. Let's just cut it back to 30 days, 6 weeks of paid time off, which is still extraordinary. And over a 10-year period, that will save the American taxpayers $60 billion. You can't make America great again until you make America accountable again. And we got a big surprise here in the start of 2017. Our payroll request with the federal government, we found 255,000 salaries from federal bureaucrats were redacted from the responsive record. Now, we've been doing this since 2007. In the last year of the Obama years, there was only 3,400 redactions, and we thought that was silly. This year, there was 250,000. We estimated the amount of payroll now hidden in the swamp is $20 billion. It was 1 out of every 5 federal bureaucrats in the executive agencies that is now hidden from view. When my op-ed published at Fox News, I was immediately called to Washington, D.C. to brief the Committee on Government and Oversight Reform. They issued a 7-page letter to the Office of Personnel Management, and already we've gotten the IRS to cave. We got the IRS public employee file with names and salaries, and that's a big victory. The party out of power always says they're going to drain the swamp. It was Reagan in '83. who said, when you're up to your armpits in alligators, it's difficult to remember that you came here to drain the swamp. In 2006, it was Nancy Pelosi that said, it's time to drain the swamp. But the swamp survives because it has resistance. And we think we know where that resistance comes from. We've identified 120,000 program officers, analysts, and their bosses, and they love their favorite program because it is their favorite program, and they resist all cuts. They make $12 billion a year, but that's not their real power. Their real power comes from the size and scope of their grant making. In the last year of the Obama administration, they doled out $600 billion worth of grants. There is a program manager at the United States Department of Agriculture in charge of farm subsidies in urban areas where there are no farms. We did an oversight report of New York City and Chicago and Washington, D.C., and tens of millions of dollars worth of federal farm subsidy were flowing into these communities. And my favorite example is right here from Hyde Park, Chicago, where the Reverend Minister Louis Farrakhan is a farmer, and he has $317,000 in farm subsidies to prove it. There is a program manager over at the EPA, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and they purchased $92 million worth of high-end luxury furniture. So let's get this straight. For the taxpayer, it's IKEA, but for the federal EPA bureaucrats, it's $7,000 executive desks and $800 pencil holders. There's a program manager in charge of the U.S. Small Business Administration, the SBA. You know, those are the folks that are supposed to be lending to mom and pop businesses on Main Street. Those entrepreneurs that have great ideas but cannot find financing in the private marketplace. We did an oversight report and we found $200 million worth of SBA lending went to private country clubs, golf clubs, beach clubs, tennis clubs, and swim clubs across America. We found $14 billion didn't go to Main Street, it went to Wall Street with no transparency thereafter. And look, in America, we should never demonize success, but you and I, we shouldn't subsidize it either. There's a program manager at the National Endowment of the Arts, and they claim that they exist to fund the starving artist, or culture in America will go away. And we fact-checked that promise, and here's what we found. $80 out of every $100 worth of arts grant funding to nonprofits went to well-heeled, asset-rich arts organizations like the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City that during the Obama years got grants from the NEA of $1.2 million despite having $4 billion worth of assets. And they cannot claim that they needed the money. And speaking of the elites gaming the system, we did an oversight report of the 8 colleges of the Ivy League. During a 6-year period, we quantified they received $42 billion worth of taxpayer subsidies, direct payments, and special tax treatment on their endowment and assets. We compared the 8 schools of the Ivy League on the direct federal payment receipt versus state governments. If the Ivy League collectively were a state government, they would outrank 16 states on the receipt of federal money. We showed the Ivy League colleges were off mission. You know, they're supposed to be educators, but they're now more federal contractor at $25 billion worth of federal payments than they are educator, having raised only $22 billion worth of undergraduate student tuition. We showed that they received all of this taxpayer help despite the fact they have a $120 billion endowment. We pushed our findings to the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal. Fox had the exclusive in 7 segments. And here's what the Ivy League needs to hear from all of us. There is no public purpose to compel working and middle-class taxpayer dollars to fund your operations. You need to lighten the load on the American taxpayer. It's a republic if you can keep it. The political class, they don't have the answers to solve these problems. The answers must come from we, the people. And I want to close with the following story of hope and inspiration. On my gubernatorial campaign in 2010, I had the privilege to travel to Poland for the 20th anniversary of free and fair elections. And I got the invitation to attend the Polish National Bank, the private event honoring the 80 stalwarts of history, the founders of Solidarity, the men and women that stood up to communism. And it was heavy emotion in the room with a lot of hard music. And these 80 stalwarts of history conveyed to me that in the early days of Solidarity, all institutional wisdom told them that it was fruitless to fight. If you stood up against the communists, you literally got shot down. That was what was the institutional memory in Poland. But they said the naysayers, when they added up all the hardware of the communists, the tanks, the planes, the machine guns, the bullets, it looked like they didn't stand a chance. But the naysayers missed something. They missed the fact that the people of Poland had stronger principles and stronger values than the communists. And we, you and I, in this room and across the entire country, we the people have stronger principles and we have stronger values. Join us, join the transparency revolution. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you.
Great job. Great job, man. Okay. Now it's our turn. Got some questions. All right, I've got some questions here, and I'm going to be getting some more momentarily. Great job. Thank you. Here from Todd Hartwell, who is not yet a member of the City Club, but we hope he'll join today. He's with TNT Complete Facility Care. Question, Adam, what would it take to get the state of Illinois fully transparent with every dime online in real time?
So we are making our way through tranches of data. So first you start out with all federal payments into the state of Illinois, and we have captured that all the way back to the year 2000. And then you shift to the federal employees based in Illinois, and we have captured those records all the way back on salary and bonus to 2007. And then you start with the state checkbook. And many people here in the room will recognize the fact that back in the day, we had to sue the Topinka administration to force open the state checkbook, and now we have that all the way back to the year 2005. And then we have all state employees, and there are 8,500 of them that make more than $100,000 a year. You even have state nurses and corrections that last year made $254,000 because of overtime. Then you have local pay and pensions, and we've captured all of that. Then you have local checkbooks, and we're making our way through that. I think the central question facing the state, though, is on pensions. Our unfunded pension liability is $250 billion, $20,000 for every man, woman, and child roughly in the state. Illinois has 660 pension programs. Wisconsin has 4. Iowa has 12. And the double dippers are crushing taxpayers in the state of Illinois.
Well, speaking of the state of Illinois, State Rep Tom Morrison asks, says, I totally support what you're doing. Thank you. Much of what you're discussing is discretionary spending. Here's his question. Is there a role for Open the Books on entitlement spending that threatens to bankrupt us?
So first of all, the question comes from State Representative Tom Morrison. Tom Morrison in 2010 was the first non-public employee as a state rep to decline his state pension. Tom, thank you very much. You've saved all of us millions of dollars. So our role at OpenTheBooks.com, everybody has a swim lane. Our role is on checkbook expenditures. So we have not delved into entitlement programs like Social Security, like Medicaid, and other programs like that.
Mark Lovelers is a member of the City Club, and he wonders if you have looked at the TIF program of the City of Chicago.
I have not looked at the TIF program of the City of Chicago since 2010. I remember when I was running statewide in 2010, I was the one Republican candidate willing to take on Mayor Daley. I said at the time that I would withhold all state payments into the City of Chicago until he opened the books on the line-by-line transactions coming out of the TIF fund. And I think they were pretty glad that I lost.
Ed Corcoran, C4CH, I think this is citizens of Clarendon Hills, maybe. How can we get transparency in nonpartisan election settings when wealthy special interest groups dominate the landscape?
So I guess the premise of the question goes to campaign finance reform. And I'm in favor, obviously, in real-time reporting of campaign finance transactions, so you can see it all in as real time as possible. I am less in favor of caps because I think the caps have led to the current situation where there's all these rules, all these third-party entities that of course don't coordinate with one another, and all the campaign cash actually in the campaigns is hidden from scrutiny, so voters don't know the agendas. I say forget the caps, open it all up, and let's see it all in real time, and then we can follow the money.
Alex Testi of AV Chicago, would you be in favor of increasing penalties for government officials and contractors who misuse public funds? If so, what do you have in mind?
Well, it's a great question. I think we should enforce, first off, the laws on the books right now. I mean, so think about this. What state's attorney is enforcing public corruption laws? And hardly any of us can think of any prosecutions. I remember, we have a attorney general, and since 2002, her name's been Lisa Madigan. And she ran for office. She told the Chicago Tribune editorial board that she was going to prosecute public corruption from the perch of the Illinois Attorney General, even if she had to indict her father. After 2 terms, the Chicago Tribune editorial board refused to endorse her again for election because she punted on public corruption. The people, it's a 95% issue on the question of whether the people of Illinois believe that when government spends a tax dollar, there's some form of corruption involved. We, the people, get it. We're ready for this reform, and we need to elect prosecutors.
Got just 2 or 3 left here. Derek Crenshaw asks, can you explain what he calls the greatest lie ever told, that tax cuts cause deficits, not overspending? So Crenshaw says that when you say tax cuts cause deficits, not overspending, that is a lie. He asks if you can explain that.
Sure. So I'm going to give you a little hint in the privacy of the room here on the live stream. Our next report coming out is on Where's the Pork? And it's on the oversight of the $600 billion worth of federal grant making in fiscal year 2016. So here's the top line on the report. Pork barrel spending is bipartisan. In the top 10 congressional districts receiving the most federal money, 5 are represented by Democrats, 5 are represented by Republicans. In the top 50 districts, it's roughly equal. It's 27 Democrats and 23 Republicans. Pork barrel spending is home to both parties, and you can see that with Republicans in control of all levels of federal government, both chambers in Congress and the presidency, and they just passed the $1.4 billion federal omnibus spending bill. At OpenTheBooks.com, I can tell you we're going to spend the next 3 years of our life giving oversight to Donald Trump's administration and the spending of his executive agencies. And because of these omnibus spending bills, unless Trump and his agency heads gets their hands around where our tax dollars are going, it is not going to be pretty.
David Radowitz, member of the City Club, asks, how do we stop large pay increases to public employees just prior to their retirement?
Yeah, I think this drives the people of Illinois absolutely crazy. You know, you're getting those property tax bills at home, and it feels like a rental payment to your local units of government. And then at OpenTheBooks.com, you see the pay spikes and the pension spikes. Government doesn't tell us what to do. We tell the government what to do. We're the driver, government's the car, they have to listen to us. The pay spikes will continue to increase until it becomes a voting issue. We need to vote the boards out of office that confer these pay spikes. But there's also something that can really help us out, and it's a statewide hard cap on property taxes. And we've advocated this since 2010. And the cap can even get a little bit more flexible, like how we live at home. We can give away an inflation factor. But anything above population growth, which there's hardly any, and inflation, government needs to start living like we live at home. And the cap can get a little bit more flexible. Government could put it on the ballot and try to persuade us to come in with more property taxes. That will eliminate pay spiking, because if government has to live under a hard cap of spending, they cannot give away the store.
Ladies and gentlemen, Adam Andrzejewski. Here he is. Woo.
Thank you.